Hi, this is Shane Dahl. Welcome back to the Men of Standing podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be talking about why so many men are staying in relationships that they're miserable in. Now, this may be something that hits home with you. And if it does, hopefully by the time that we're done with our discussion today, you will have learned quite a bit. And I've given you some information you can use to think about and to challenge you in hopefully make a decision to do something different. Hopefully, I can encourage and if I can help you with that, that's what I do. I provide the coaching. Now, if it's not, you probably know somebody. It could be a buddy, it could be a family member, somebody at work. Like a man that's in that position where he's in this relationship, but he's just not fulfilled. He's not happy. Maybe he's not feeling respected, and you ask him about it. Hey, how things going with Mary? And he's like, yeah, no, it's good. And there's always this, she's this and she does that, and I'm very grateful. And then there's this but, and it's everything after the but. It's the but, and then he goes through the list of things that don't meet his expectations, that don't align with his values, that he doesn't feel respected, and it's like, okay, well, why are you staying? And that's what we want to be really digging into on this. So before we get too far into why I believe this happens, I think it bears at least bringing up that we need to be really soberly thinking about this. If you're in that position or you know somebody that does, to obviously encourage them or want to have a heart-to-heart talk, because here's the reality. Man, if you're in your 40s and 50s, the clock's ticking. That the hourglass, the sands in the hourglass is running. It's going right. It's going down, and so it's like we're burning daylight. And what you don't want to do is you don't want to be continuing, because days turns into weeks, weeks turns into months, months turns into years. And if you're in a situation where you're not fulfilled, you're not happy, then we're delaying the inevitable, and it's like you don't want to be wasting this time. And so I think that we ought to at least start with that, with recognizing like this is something we need to be taken seriously. And I also need to say, listen, I'm not talking about, it should be understood, but it needs to be said. I'm not talking about men that are married. Now, that is a conversation we need to have, and we will, about men who are in marriages and they're unfulfilled, they're unhappy, right? Their expectations aren't being met, and she's not respecting them, and that's a different subject, though, because I don't want to be insinuating like, well, he just needs to move on. Well, he's in a covenant. So, but we'll talk about that. But the guy I'm talking about is the one he's been divorced, he's separated, or, he's just been in a long-term relationship, or it could be even a short-term for that matter. It could be, 3-4 months, whatever that is. But he's not fulfilled, he's not happy, and he's not respected. And so why is he staying? Why is he sticking around? And I think that the primary reason, and there's a lot of variables here, but I think the primary reason is that man's afraid of being alone. And I know a lot of guys are going to be like, I'm not afraid of being alone. I'll just go find another one, and I'll put the Old Spice on and go down and meet another one. I'll go downtown and pick another one up. It's like, come on. It's not that easy, especially in today's dating world, which is something that, we'll address here in a little bit. But I'm not buying that. And I know why, because a lot of guys, if you can get them to open up, if they trust you, and you can have a heart to heart, they'll admit that they don't want to be alone. But a lot of guys won't, because it's pride and ego, right? It's like, well, I don't want to confess that I just don't want to be alone, because, well, then I won't be able to meet anybody, and it just kind of makes him look like he's weak, or, he's not very self-confident, so he's not going to say that. But that's the reality, right? And I don't think that it's because, well, he just wants to have somebody there. He wants to have the status and the image of having a partner, and he doesn't want to come home to an empty house, or he doesn't want to have to cook or clean or do laundry. It's like, come on. And this isn't 1970. Like, a lot of men have been through, they've been separated, they've been divorced, they were bachelors for years, like he knows how to cook a meal. He knows how to run a load of laundry or run a vacuum. Like, that's not it. There's a bigger reason here that I don't think gets discussed enough. I don't know that a lot of men are even aware of this. But so when I talk about like the fear of being alone, I don't think that's just a mental thing. I don't think that's just a headspace. I honestly believe that this is a physiological cause. They're froze. They're stuck in something that they don't like and they don't want, but they're afraid to move because it's within their body. It's in their nervous system. Now, let me explain. So, obviously, this goes without saying. This is clear and obvious that men are under a lot of stress. They got finances, they got with the kids, and with work and businesses, and so they got to regulate that stress somehow. And what a lot of men obviously do is they turn to unhealthy, destructive ways, which we don't want to be doing that. They haven't learned how to self-regulate. They haven't learned how to soothe themselves, so they turn to alcohol and drugs and pornography and stuff it's destructive. So that's not the way. But the primary way in which a man can regulate his nervous system, one of the most powerful, effective ways for him to do that is through a woman's touch. And so that's something that, again, he may not even be aware of that, but if he's been through a breakup in the past, especially if he's been through a toxic relationship, if you've been through having to be with a manipulative woman, he understands it because he's felt that. It's literally, it creates in the body. If he's had to go through, let me just explain this. So physical touch, and obviously that includes sex, but a woman's touch, that physical touch and sex, that is one of the most powerful ways for him to regulate his nervous system. And so if he's been in a position where he's used to using that as a form of regulation. And again, especially so if he's under a lot of stress, and if a lot of stress is also being added to him in his relationship from her. And again, if that's a toxic, if that's a drama-filled, drama mama relationship, that's only going to, enhance this whole thing. Where he's going through a lot of stress. So cortisol, I want you to just kind of follow me on this. This is all hormonal and chemical. So when he's under a lot of stress, his body's just pumping out cortisol. And so, that's more of that catabolic state. But then if he gets that touch, if he has sex with her, that's a dopamine release. That's oxytocin. He feels like that makes him feel good. So he's got these periods of low, and then he's got this random period of a high. And I want you to think about this. That's the same cycle that would be in place if somebody was doing a addictive drug. It's the same pathway. It works in the same pathway in the brain. I'm not joking. And so that's literally something that he probably doesn't even realize this, that he can become addicted to that form of regulation. And so there's a fear. It's not just in his head, although it's subconscious going to be there. It's within his body that if I'm not with her, how am I going to regulate myself? Well, he most certainly can, and he has to learn this, so he's got to heal, and he has to learn how to regulate himself, because if not, he's going to be caught in this vicious cycle, and it's no bueno, right? And I want to touch on that just for a minute, because I think it's, again, this is something that doesn't get discussed enough. So let me just set the table. So he's in a relationship that he's not fulfilled. He's not happy, but it's more than him just not being happy. He's compromising. Yeah, that relationship doesn't meet his expectation. It doesn't align with his values, and especially if she's disrespected him. And he feels he doesn't feel good about this situation, but yet he continues to just go along with it. And so every time he does that, he's going against his own values. He's going against his own identity. And he's actually practicing, without knowing it, a form of self-erasure of his own identity. Because he can't tell himself that I'm this kind of man, right? So every man's going to establish he has an identity. He's established an identity. And whatever that identity is, if he tells himself, well, I'm a man that does this, I'm a man of that, I'm a man of this value and this character, but yet over in his life, he's not doing that, well, that's a conflict. That's going to create some cognitive dissonance. That's a problem. And so that's something that the more that he does that, the more that he's creating this additional tension and pressure, and he starts to lose self-respect for himself. He starts to question his own identity. He starts to practice self-loathing. He loses his self-confidence. And again, this is no bueno, right? Because if a man doesn't respect himself, she's not going to respect him. And if she doesn't respect him, like, we just got this vicious cycle going there. So this is something that it has to get addressed. It always starts, number one, this whole issue goes back to his identity. He's out of alignment with his identity. And if he's not out of alignment with it, he needs to set a healthy identity. He's got to set a true identity, right? So that's where it starts. But it's I just want you to see that not only is this clearly a very destructive pattern, and one that has to get addressed, it has to get dealt with. It's one that I think a lot of men aren't even aware of. They don't even realize this. They're just like, they tell themselves, they make up all these reasons of why that they stay, and it's always going to be veiled. It's like a veiled form of obligation or duty or valor. It's like there's this integrity of like, well, I want to do the right thing by her, and I want to do good, and she has done this, and it's like they make up these reasons, and it's crazy, because it's like you're making up a reason for staying miserable. No. It's like it's your obligation, it's your responsibility to lead in this relationship. And you want to do that with love, and you want to do that with respect. We want to do that according to the ways that Christ would teach us and has shown us. But if you do that and you're not in a marriage covenant, and you set those expectations, you set those boundaries, you set that table, and she's not showing that she's willing, she has no interest, she's not following you in that, there is no change, well then you have to do what you have to do here. And so if you can recognize that, okay, yes, I see myself in this position. I know that I'm probably staying because I am afraid of being alone and I don't know how to regulate this. It's, well, how can I? How can I regulate myself outside of that? And this is something where in my coaching program, we get into this a lot. I work with men a lot in this because at the end of the day, it's not just enough to know, like, okay, well, here's the problem, here's the cause, this is what's going on, or even why. But it's like there needs to be instruction and guidance and help on how to. Like, where's the blueprint? Somebody help me to get from point A to point B, because I don't know. Okay, now that I see, I've had an awakening, I see, I understand. Well, that's mental. But remember, we got to rewire the nervous system and reset that. So there are specific strategies. There's tactics and techniques that you can use to do that. And there's, for the sake of time, let's just go into a few of these. One of the first things is that I talk with my men about is the idea of how are you letting out that energy? How are you expending? All men have a build-up energy. How are you expending that? And the first thing I ask them is, are you exercising? Are you working out? Because if a man's not doing physical activity, if he doesn't have a laborious job, especially if he's in more of a sedentary or white-collar job and he's not doing anything laborious, how is he expending that energy? Well, he's not. It's all pent up. So it's like, get your butt to the gym. Like that's the first thing you got to do is obviously, and it goes beyond just this whole idea of like health and fitness and strength. Like, yes, there's all reasons why we want to do it. But it's also that you can actually regulate your nervous system. So that's number one. I want you to think about things like, is that man, is he spending any time at all in quiet, in silence? Because if a man doesn't know how to sit in silence, if there's always got to be doing something, there's always got to have noise, always there's something going on, well, he's just constantly wired. His sympathetic nervous system is always jacked. So it's like I always encourage this, spend, and it's not just a matter of suggestions. This has to become discipline. It becomes structure, it becomes routine, and that's, again, part of resetting the body, resetting the nervous system and the brain. We have to set patterns. It's all about patterns. It's part of the whole process. We need to have predictable, consistent patterns. So I want you to think about that, spending quiet time and reflection and prayer, getting in God's word, expressing gratitude, not just externally with others, although that's a part of it. It's also in your internal, in your prayers, in your quiet time. Again, that's resetting. It's resetting the hormones in the body. Doing acts of service, right? Not just, how it's often said, like if you get into a bad funk, you get into a bad spot, you're coming through a very difficult time, a traumatic state, one of the best things you can do is get your mind off yourself. Get your mind off yourself and get it on other people, to go serve, go volunteer, go do something, call a buddy, go look to do something. Your mind's not focused on you, it's focused on something else. I'm telling you, praise God. It just amazes me the more I understand this and get into this. It's like it's a double win. That's a win-win, because when you do something good for another person, you're getting a dopamine spike. You help produce good hormone, feel good hormones. And what do you think you do for the person you're doing something nice, good for? Well, you make them feel good. So it's a win-win. And the exact opposite of that is true. When a man is selfish, he he's releasing the stress hormones. He's suppressing dopamine. He's suppressing oxytocin. So it's just, there is actually, we can look at nature, we can look at biology, we can look at this and see how what we find in God's word, it all just connects. So, all right, so we talk about exercise, we talk about quiet time, we get into different breathing techniques, different deep breathing to regulate your nervous system. Anything that's going to be something that will help to create more of a sympathetic, when I say sympathetic regulation, we're trying to get the body to get more inept of being in that what's called the parasympathetic state, which is more of that the lowered heart rate, the relaxation state. So you're not constantly wired. And so it's taking things like spending time in the evenings, instead of being scrolling and doing things that are just jacking your brain with dopamine, and especially if that guy's on dating apps or if he's on social media, and it's just like it's crushing your brain. Instead of doing that, sitting down and putting some headphones on and listening to some relaxing, some good music. Nothing that's going to be that's going to make you stressed out, but something that's relaxing. Like that's a good way to regulate the nervous system. So there's a host of other ways, but just for the sake of time here, just know there are things that can be done so that he can learn how to not have to feel like he needs to have the woman's touch or having sex to be able to regulate himself. And obviously that's, a lot of guys get themselves in trouble where even if they're in a relationship or they get hooked on lust, they get hooked on the pornography, and it's so destructive. It's so destructive. But one of the reasons why they do that, and it's beyond just a pure superficial lust side. It's a form of regulating their nervous system, and they become addicted to it because that's the only thing that works. And especially if they're in a relationship with somebody who doesn't give them sex or doesn't give them touch. It's like they find it's like crack cocaine into their brain, because that they find that they can regulate, but obviously it's hollow and empty, and it's going to produce all kind of problems. It's the devil's grease slide. But again, they're hurting, so that's just where they go. So the goal here is not to become a man who doesn't need anyone, who doesn't need a woman. That's not the objective. But the objective should be that he's a man who doesn't need someone just to feel okay. Right? That's the healing. That's when he's healed. When, he doesn't want to be alone. He doesn't want to be some loner, just him and a dog. Well, no, that's not good. But it's also he doesn't want to feel like he has to have somebody, because if he feels that way, he's more prone to running out and just rebounding into a bad relationship, or just filling time and space with women that he shouldn't. And a lot of these are going to be, again, they could be, whether they're gold diggers or manipulators, or they're not good for him. But yet it's like, well, that's better than having nothing, so that's where he goes. But that's not the objective either. So I want to just touch on this real quick before we wrap up today. It's, I always want to point it back to God's word. And what do we find in there? What do we see in there? And one of the things when I was making my notes for this episode was I couldn't help but thinking about the book of Ecclesiastes. And if you're not familiar with that, it's written by King Solomon. And, King Solomon, as you may know, this was the wisest man who ever lived. God asked him, this is King David's son. God asked him, what he wanted. And he says, give me wisdom to lead your people. And God was pleased with that. So he gave him more wisdom than anybody had or anybody would have. And not only that, he blessed him with multitude of wealth and power and possessions. And, I don't think this was God's intention, but in fact, I know it wasn't, but it's one of the things that led him to his demise. But King Solomon had a weakness for the ladies here. It says he had 700 wives and 300 concubines. Man, what guy who has 1,000 women? But he did. And so we see this in the book of Ecclesiastes. It's basically, he's writing about, and I'll just summarize this in 10 seconds. He's like, hey man, I got everything. I've done it all, seen it all, tried it all, and it's all meaningless. It's like chasing after the wind. He's like, none of it fulfilled me at all. I've done everything. I've built vineyards. I've had women. I've everything that money could buy. And at the very end of his writing, this is what he comes down to. He's like, so the conclusion of the matter is to fear, have reverence for God, and to serve him and obey him, for that is the duty of man. He's like, just get right with God and follow him, because that's the only thing that's going to matter. And it's like he's right. He's right, and we see this, and it's at the end of the day, listen, and I want to make sure I just touch on this. Men, nothing is going to fulfill you. I don't care how many boats, cars, motorcycles, how many women, it doesn't, how much money you make. None of that is going to fulfill you apart from a relationship with Jesus Christ. You're wired this way. You're made this way. He made you with this keyway that only he can fill. And so you're going to chase the wind. You're going to run in circles. You're going to try to fill with all these things, and it ain't going to work. You got to put him central. You got to put him first place. Put him at that foundation and learn from him. Love him. Follow him. And he will show you the way. And that's one of the things that I do in my program. It's a central portion. It's a central part. It's the foundation. So we need that. You're not going to find that joy and fulfillment apart from him. That's what King Solomon found. And that's the truth. That's what we see. So lastly, I want to give you a little bit of a challenge, right? So if you're finding yourself in this position, and if you're not, and you know somebody it is, you got a buddy, I want you to challenge him with this, right? It's like, I want you to ask yourself, or again, ask your buddy, are you staying in this relationship because you're afraid of being alone? And if you are, like, you need to sit with that a little bit, because I think there's something about staying in a relationship where you feel that you can build, right? You can grow something there. You can lead her, and you can build something that ultimately is going to be fulfilling for you and her. It's going to give honor and glory to God. You're going to be able to follow Christ. You're going to be fulfilled, right? That's going to lead into a marriage covenant, and you can actually you can receive the benefits and the blessings of that. Or are you staying because you just don't know if you're going to be okay without her? And that's a big difference, right? There are two completely different reasons. One's love, and the other one's it's purely a fear of, it's out of dependence. And so I think that's something that should be sobering, and we need to really ponder that. And if there's healing that needs to be done, if there's work that needs to be done, man, that's what I do. And so feel free to reach out, message me, DM, just put something in the comments, and I'll reach back out. But just know there is a way here. And the first step is obviously recognize it, and the second step is we need to have a plan, we need to have a strategy to do something about it. So hopefully that helped. Hope you enjoyed the content. And as always, like, subscribe, and until next time, we'll talk soon. God bless.